Hey everyone, welcome to DrawImagiNation. My name is Dimitri and today we're going to go through a tutorial on how to draw these kind of style images here. I'm going to run through you step by step on how to draw this particular image here. I hope you enjoy the tutorial and thank you for watching. Cheers! Alright, let's jump straight into this tutorial, guys. First of all, the canvas I chose to be A3 size just because I like to work in that resolution as well. And I like the dimensions of it, so it's a bit of a challenge on how to frame the image that I'm going to make. Now for the idea. How did I come up with this idea? Well, pretty funny actually. I was watching this old school 80s or like early 90s Russian TV show, and I've noticed this reporter walking around and interviewing random people and bands and things like that, and she looked out of place a bit. So I just ran with that idea and thought, hey, why don't I draw a reporter that is interviewing people at pretty inappropriate times. So I've come up with this idea that she will be interviewing an orc mid-battle, basically. So this is the draft stage. This is where you play around with your imagination, you explore different things and you push your concepts further and develop your idea. So as you can see, I'm using reference here, and I highly encourage people to use reference as much as they can. Here I've compiled a number of JPEGs together in one image, and I've opened it in Photoshop and set it aside as my reference. You can put it on your second monitor if you like. At the moment I just put it right next to my picture. As you notice, I keep drawing and redrawing and deleting and drawing again and again different parts of the body. This is why I love Photoshop or digital media in general, because you can play around with it as much as you can, especially in this draft stage. Also, it's a good habit to work zoomed out, so you can see the whole picture. I flip the canvas a lot because it's good to have a fresh perspective on your image when it's mirrored. I usually find a ton of mistakes when I flip the image backwards and forwards. It's just the way your brain works. So take advantage of that in Photoshop compared to the traditional media where you have to have mirrors and things. I'm drawing the orc now, and the first thing I draw is just a simple face, simple shape for the face and the arm, because I'm thinking about he's going to be copying some arrows in that shield. And at the moment it's not looking very good, so I move around a lot using a lasso tool and finding some space for the leg in there as well. And I'm quite not happy with the way the head looks at the moment, and the arm is a bit way too close. I do correct this later in the video, but as long as I have an essential feel to what's going on, then I can modify it to whatever I want. Just doing little adjustments to the muscle structure, so the anatomy comes in pretty handy at this stage. So I keep adjusting, keep pushing it, and just defining the lines a bit more, and now I'm decided to move the hand even up a bit more so he has a bigger silhouette on that arm, and the shield as well. The leg a bit thicker, just jumping from part to part on the whole image, making it look a bit cool. So in your spare time, guys, if you can't come up with anything to draw, practice your fundamentals, practice your anatomy. If you like character sketching, I would definitely recommend doing life drawing. Just Google life drawing near you and I'm sure you'll find some good places to go. I would strongly recommend that if you're considering to be a good artist. You can find lots of reference through books. I can recommend you some awesome anatomy books. And photographs. Google some photographs, trace over the photographs, literally just import into Photoshop, go over the top and trace the muscle groups. It's a good way to practice. I think at this stage what I did is I actually stood up from the chair and took a photo of myself in that particular pose. I'm not going to show you the photo here, okay? But it is embarrassing. And I encourage people to do that. If you can't find any reference for the pose that you're looking for, take a photo of yourself, then print it out and burn it so no one can ever see it ever again. Then so I'm kind of happy with the picture, and then I'm starting working on something smaller. So you've got your details on the skin and your hair, a couple of jewelry bits here and there, adjusting the jacket a little bit, and drawing a couple of things in the foreground and the background. Just looking back at the reference of these orcs. They look pretty cool, man. I really like the designs. Actually, I haven't seen the movie yet, I know, but they look pretty sweet. I have to watch sometime, yeah. I'm just redoing the hair. Something's not sitting right with the neck here. I've noticed now I can't get the neck muscles into the head properly, so I've decided to draw another head. So I'm just constructing the head. So I started with a circle. I've determined the eye level and dropped a center line, draw the jaw and the ear, then the fangs and the hair. And I've deleted the old head and placed the new one on the top, and the muscle groups on the neck work much better than before. So I decided to go with that one. It fits in much nicer with the perspective that we have. So with the horizon line, it actually is located at the waist of the reporter. That's why the head didn't connect properly, because the angle of it wasn't correct. Just to revise, think of your own brain as the computer. Your RAM, your short-term memory, your immediate focus should be on what's happening in your picture. So what's happening with the characters, what is the story that you try to tell? And then your hard drive, your long-term memory, should lie your fundamentals. So you always have access to your fundamentals, but your focus is on the story of the image. Alright, let's waste no time. Let's jump straight into the line work. So the draft stage took me about, what, hour and a half or so to do. And I think it took me about hour and a half for the lines as well, depending on how many details you put in and the pace that you're going at, basically. You can take the whole day off and draw just the lines if you want to make it absolutely perfect. The brush that I'm using is my custom-made line brush. It's pretty good if you want to get a nice clean edge on your lines, and it works great in small lines and thick ones too. I've created a new layer on top of our draft layer. I set the draft layer to about 50% opacity and I just locked it. And so on the new layer that I created, that will be my line layer. And this is where I focus on the separate parts of the body. This is why the draft stage is pretty crucial to this. That way in the draft stage you work out your proportions, your composition, you develop your idea, your silhouette is looking great, your perspective is fantastic. You get that down in the draft stage, and then here what I would do, I would go in and concentrate on individual parts of the body. So right now we're concentrating on the head, and I'm basically thinking about what will work for this character in terms of making him more believable to the audience. Does he or she belong in this universe? What history does the character have? I would think all about that and include it all in this stage. I would constantly use cross-contouring to create an illusion of this character being a three-dimensional character. I'm being very deliberate in placing the lines as cross-contours on the figure. Yeah, don't do it at random, think about which direction the form is heading. I'm using some directional hatching here, mainly on his muscle groups. It's an easy way to describe the muscle group that you want to draw. Instead of putting a line through the fold of the muscle, I would use directional hatching to define it. Another good practice to get into is practice clean lines. So mine are not very clean, I know, but it's good to practice them just separately. So create a shitty little sketch and then try to do a really clean line for the outline of that picture. The more you do it, the better you'll become at it, and faster you will be. Also, what will come in handy later is to close the gaps between the lines. So when you're drawing, you don't have to do it all the time, but for the majority of it, try to close the gaps so when we do the coloring and doing the selection of the spaces, the gaps are closed so the selection doesn't leak over to the other parts of the picture. Also, keep stacking ideas together. Keep pushing it further and adding more things to the design to make it look pretty sweet. When drawing the faces, take extra time to make them look right. Every small thing can make a big difference. People these days can tell if the face looks like shit or you know what you're talking about. So I would recommend practicing drawing faces. Just Google a couple of pictures of celebrities or, take some pictures of yourself and just keep practicing different angles. And when drawing the reporter's face, I haven't actually put a full line for the nose of her nose. Reason because I found it looks better if I don't fill that little gap in the tip of the nose and just fill it in with color. And yeah, I do spend a bit more time on her face just to make sure it looks right and the angle of it is right and the chin is looking good and that the whole face connects to the neck properly. Don't forget to take breaks, guys. Step away from the picture for about 10 minutes or so, go for a walk, run around, have something to eat, do what you gotta do, come back and you'll have a fresh eye in the picture and then you go, oh, that's what I did wrong. I do that all the time and I'm looking at it now and there's so many things I could have done better. But, what can you do? So finishing the line layer up, I'm pretty happy with the result. and adding a couple of more details, some birds and things like that, and then we are going to move on to color. Alright, it's color time. Let's jump straight into the technique. Once we've done the line layer, what I will do is create a new layer underneath the line layer, and that will be our color layer. Then I would select the magic wand tool and select each individual part of the character. So right now we're doing the hair. This is where the closing the gaps comes really handy. After I do that, I go to select, modify, expand. I saw this technique ages ago in some how to draw manga book, and it's been a huge time saver coloring and the line work. So I would literally go and select each part of the picture that has a different color, and I would color it all on one layer. If you really want, you can use different layers for each individual item. So you'll have a layer for the skin, a layer for hair, a layer for clothing, a layer for the trees, the sky, and so on and so on. I found if I do that, it is so time consuming, so I've decreased it to just putting all of it on one simple layer. That way you can just select the individual thing and just change the color on the spot. And you don't have to put the final colors in when you're doing these selections. This is just so you can have an isolated color for each item. Later down the track you would play around with different color schemes and harmonies that go together. A quick tip for coloring in the characters, what I would recommend is using 3 or less colors per character. Don't go over the top with more than 3 colors, that's unnecessary. And make the 2 of the colors in the same range and maybe use one complementary color for the other, or it could be all in the same spectrum. So what you want for the maximum effect, either to pop the characters out of the picture, so around the character the background is darker than the character, so the character pops out of the picture, or quite the opposite, or you want to hide the character in the background and only maybe a part of them is visible. Also, when you do these coloring ends, you've kind of noticed your mistakes a bit more clearer because there's some value and tone in your image. So yeah, as I said before, I usually go jumping backwards and forwards between the line layer and the color layer to fix the little mistakes that I made earlier. You probably can see I've added a couple of more things to the background, like some trees, some extra little trees here and there, just to fill up the scene a little bit. Also added some plants in the foreground as well. When I zoom out you'll see it. Just adds just that little bit of a touch to the scene, makes it a bit more real. I think I would say coloring would be one of the hardest things for me at this stage, I guess. Just choosing all the different combinations and making sure that the harmonies work together well. I find that pretty tricky, so this stage took me quite a while to play around with. I mean, I'm happy with the result at the end though, which is good. I changed the color of the orc also to red, just because it was kind of blending in with the background. It didn't have enough of a pop, you know what I mean? So I changed them to something a bit more dramatic, and contrasting that with the reporter, her color scheme is a bit more in the cool ranges, except her shoes. Another thing that helped me to get better at coloring is learning a bit more about color theory and color harmonies. Cool website I would recommend to visit is Adobe Cooler. That's K-U-L-E-R. Google it, and there you can customize your color wheel using their system. You also can explore the website where other people created their own color palettes. I would definitely recommend it. There's so many different variations of the color palettes and the combinations that people created, and it's all for free. I would definitely take advantage of that, guys. For shading, I've added a new layer below the line layer and on top of all of our color layers, and I set it to multiply. Then I chose a light purple color similar to the color of their jacket. You can try different variations of the color, but don't go too dark at all. Keep it very light tones. You can try a little bit of a purple color, try a little bit of a blue as well, maybe a little bit into the reds. See what works better for your picture. Usually stick in the bluish tones and you'll get a great result. I'm using the chalk brush to create shadows on the characters, and I'm not pressing too much on it, so it's kind of a little bit softer edge to it. And I'm thinking about the light source. So actually, as we see in this picture, the sun is setting behind the trees in the background. So the light would actually shine on the orc's back and on the side of the girl. I didn't want to use that lighting because I thought the characters would appear a bit too dark. So I've decided to go with a stylistic choice and chose the light source to be about at the top left and a little bit closer to us. Another thing to remember is to include casting shadows. That's a crucial step in creating shadows to make the picture three-dimensional. For example, the orc's arm and the hammer create a casting shadow on the ground and the rock, and then the girl is casting a shadow on the rocks where her feet are. To push the design of your characters further and further right until the end, like here I've added some war paint to him to make him look pretty badass. I'm just thinking now, another thing I could have added is some battle scars on his skin to make him look like a warrior that's seen better days. With that war paint, I'm wrapping it around the muscle groups, so that creates another awesome illusion of the three-dimensionality of the character. Cool, now that I'm happy with the shadows, I've taken a small break from that point and then came back with a fresh eye, and I'm gonna make some changes. I've decided to cut out some of the clouds that interfere with the silhouette of her head and just erase that. I flipped the canvas and then I drew a couple of more clouds here and there. So guys, constantly think about changing something. Don't think it's all settled in stone. Be ruthless with your picture. If you really don't like something, change it. So let's add some highlights to it now. So I've created another layer on top of the shadows layer and below the line layer. At the moment it's just set to normal. Then I used the lasso tool to select the highlighted parts that I would think would be highlighted by the light source. And then also selecting the parts that I would think a second light source would be hitting the characters. So for example, along the edges of the outer edges of the bended knee, his back, underneath the raised arm, the chains and the bracelet. Then moving to the reporter, highlighting her hair. Imagine her hair as an egg, and the closest part to you would be highlighted the most, along the equator of the egg. Keep in mind that the fabric is not that reflective, so when you're doing highlights on the fabric, keep it light. Once I've selected the highlighted parts, I would fill it with a solid color, so for now it would be yellow. I would decrease the opacity to about maybe 50% or so, and then play with the different blending modes. And I've settled with luminosity and just decreased the opacity a bit more, that way it creates a bit of a gentle light effect on the characters. Then I've created another layer on top of that, set it to overlay, and using my line brush, I would add small highlights to the whole picture, pushing it and creating points of interest. I also wanted the background not to be too bland, so I'm gonna add a couple of more colors to the grass. This is all on the overlay layer. I just selected my line brush, then selected the bright yellow color and placing some spots on the grass to make it look like flowers. Throw in some white in there as well. Green, white and yellow go pretty well together, and that makes the picture a bit more brighter and happier. As the last thing I do for the image, I would play with adjustment layers. So the key ones that I would use are curves, hue and saturation, and selective color. You can find them by going the top menu layer, adjustment layers. In curves, I would increase the brightness of the picture just a little bit. In hue and saturation, I would increase the contrast on the picture. And in selective color, I would go through each individual color and play around and see what looks cool. I would also change the color of the lines. I would double click on the line layer to bring up the layer style, go to color overlay and change the color to somewhere in the dark reds. It just gives the picture a bit of a softer feel, doesn't feel so harsh with black lines. And for a bit of a stylistic choice, I found a paper texture on the internet and just imported it here on top of everything else, set it to multiply and decrease the opacity. And boom, the picture is done. Yay!
If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, I really do appreciate it. If you want to see the full 40-minute version of this tutorial, please click the link in description. Keep drawing guys, see you later.